I'm just gonna say it. I just have to say it. Andor Season 2 is literally the best piece of modern Star Wars media that's been ever produced, especially from Disney. And there's just so much to unpack here, like Jesus Christ. So yeah, you guys probably saw the length of the video and it's probably gonna be really long. Maybe you guys didn't click on it because it's a long video, but I'm doing this because I finished watching it in its entirety and I didn't want to make a review for every single arc / like chapter or whatever. So yeah, it's gonna be a long video because of that. And also at the same time, you know, before I get into any of my review videos as they go, I like to give like a basic little summary. It's not gonna go too into depth about it. It's like non-spoilers from here, but then afterwards, spoilers, so spoiler warning there. But yeah, I like to give a brief summary. The entirety of the Andor series goes through the adventures of Cassian Andor, who goes from being like a lowly petty criminal to becoming one of the captains of the rebellion. The setting takes place 5 years before Rogue One, and while Season 1 was spent talking about the first of those 5 years, Season 2 spent each arc or chapter talking about 1 year. There were 4 acts in Season 2, and thus 4 years have passed, leading us to Rogue One. Now, when Season 2 initially released, it brought raving reviews from critics and fans alike, and on the tomato meter, it got a 99% when the first 3 episodes came out. But then a lot of audiences, well, I guess a minor part of the audience, they weren't really impressed. You see, a majority of the fans praised this as possibly the best Star Wars show ever made, but there were also a few out there who had many things to complain about. The most common theme of these reviews was about the fact that there was too much yapping in the series. Now you listen here, you little shits. This is a political drama. There's going to be fucking talking all the fucking time. Yes, Star Wars is about the battles and all that, but it's not only about the fucking battles. It's not about whipping out your lightsabers in front of younglings all the time. Wait, no, don't take that out of context, please don't. Anyway, though, I will admit that some parts of the season did get a little bit dull, especially at the beginning of Season 2. In my opinion, parts of the wedding, like the whole ritual thing, weren't exactly necessary for the overarching story. However, many of these so-called quote-unquote critics believe that the wedding wasn't necessary in its entirety. What? Now, people are allowed to have opinions. It's a free country after all. But I think I know whenever someone is wrong, and I think those kinds of people are, I'm gonna say it, really stupid. People don't seem to realize that rebellion isn't solely about people dying in glorious battle. War requires more than just brute force. In fact, that was how the Empire lost many of their battles. War requires strategy, negotiation, diplomacy, courage, and all these other things beyond the scope of the battlefield. And that's where people tend to have their criticisms with Andor. They also seem to think that a lot of the dialogue tended to go nowhere. And while I agree that parts like Episode 2 weren't really necessary, they are used for build-up and catching us off guard with the upcoming events. Also, all of this so-called useless dialogue, believe it or not, actually goes somewhere. This in particular relates to the early parts of the season with Mon Mafma. People tend to forget that Mon Mafma is a senator. She is a politician. Politicians don't often get involved in physical conflict personally, so I don't see the argument as to why the talking led to nowhere. I'd say that Mon Mafma is easily the best written character in my opinion, and why I say that is how morally gray she is. In Season 1, she basically sold out her daughter into a political marriage so that she could continue to secretly fund the rebellion. While holding power within the government could allow her to do that, we find that it goes beyond that. Mon Mafma starts off as pretty naive when we look at the full scale of the rebellion. The Empire's been known to constantly spy on its senators, so there's the issue of trust. Hell, Luthen also sent in a spy for her even though Mon Mafma trusted him with all her heart, kinda, I guess-ish? She also doesn't realize that the Senate doesn't really hold any power, because let's be honest, Palpatine doesn't give a fuck what these people say. Through different pieces of dialogue, we slowly see how her words and conversations open her up to the full scale of the rebellion. She now shields her emotions, but during the wedding she has her one crack to cover up: her family. When her daughter decides to cut ties with her, she finally sealed off the rest of her emotion and devoted herself fully to the rebellion. If we cut to the Gorman Massacre, we see now that she no longer can remain silent on the matter, and delivers one of the most impactful speeches written in, I'd say, all of drama history. Like, forget the scope of Star Wars, just drama. Like, who else has the balls within the Senate or the Star Wars universe to straight up call out the Emperor of all people? I mean, fucking bailed on it. The dialogue between her and the other senators and other members of the rebellion show that it takes a great amount of courage and support to stand up against the injustices of the Empire, which makes it really important, and yet people don't seem to get that. What I also loved about Season 2 of Andor is that it explored darker themes spread throughout the story. I could practically see Tony Gilroy playing with the line between TV-14 and TVMA. We get the common themes like alcoholism, drug abuse, and violence. However, we're given darker themes like, and I'd like to give a warning, if you want to skip this part, go ahead and skip, but there's sexual assault, genocide, propaganda, and suicide. Throughout the first 3 arcs of the season, we get the build up into the main plot of the Gorman Massacre, but we also get a glimpse of other stories. Like I said before, we get into the politics of the rebellion with Mon Mafma, but we also see how Bix begins her healing journey with her trauma. And this kind of leads me to another point of building a strong female character. Many negative reviews pointed out that Disney is constantly trying to push the female empowerment agenda, which I agree with to a certain extent, but Gilroy writes these powerful female characters in a way that doesn't seem too forced. There was a video I saw recently from a YouTube channel called Flying Walrus that talks about how another goated show called Blue Eye Samurai, please watch it if you haven't, it's fucking amazing, fixes the strong female protagonist problem, and his video gives a great analysis as to how the main character, Mizu, is a proper way to write a strong female.
Mizu is a strong character, not because of some arbitrary Deus Ex Machina or Mary Sue syndrome. Mizu is a strong character because of her perseverance. She suffers, struggles, has had a horrendous life, and overcomes it all. We empathize with her journey and celebrate her accomplishments and growth.
This could also relate to Bix and Mothma's storylines in the series. Bix in particular has a harsh life seeing her fiancé brutally be shot down, being tortured for days by Imperials, and then almost getting assaulted. In fact, you know that a scene like this is written well not because of how horrifying the action is, but how uncomfortable and disgusting it is. Now, I just want to clarify that I'm not justifying saying that, it was perfect to have a rape scene. Rape scenes in general, or just rape in general, actually is just not something comfortable, and it's actually something quite traumatizing to people. But what I'm saying is that the scene was written really well. She's gone through some of the worst things that any human could ever go through, and while she fell into a dark path by abusing drugs, we can see her slowly persevere through her trauma with Cassian's help. She then fully goes through her healing by getting revenge on Dr. Gorst. With Mon Mafma, she is morally gray with a lot of her decisions. As a politician, she has to make morally gray decisions for the betterment of the galaxy. Thrusting her daughter into political marriage was one of those decisions, and while she tried to get her out of it, it was far too late. She also deceives her husband by spying on him. She encourages basically terrorism through the rebellion's actions. And just as Flying Walrus says in his video, you don't really want to root for her decisions, but you kind of understand why she does them. Both characters are written to not just succeed from their problems, but to persevere and grow from them, which I believe was one of the greatest qualities of this show. Going back to the dark themes, I think what Andor portrayed really well was that rebellion isn't always as glorious as it seems, and shows us the gritty details of the average rebel. Sure, Andor isn't your average rebel, but we see failed operations like the Gorman Massacre, and hell, even side characters dying. A lot of Star Wars fans, especially us dudes, love to envision us dying a glorious death in battle in Star Wars, but that obviously isn't reality. Brasso's death in Episode 3 wasn't some dramatic thing, it was almost like he died in the background. Instant. What makes this reality harsher is that Cassian doesn't even give himself enough time to properly mourn his death. In fact, he doesn't give himself any time to properly mourn anyone. Throughout the series, Cassian has only cried twice. Once when he finds out his mother has passed in Season 1, and when he drives away from the Gorman Massacre. In real dangerous situations like these, you cannot give yourself a time to mourn. Now, obviously, I haven't been on a real battlefield before. Hell, I'm a pussy when I go play airsoft or paintball. Yeah, but I can probably say for sure that a lot of veterans would agree that when you're in an active battlefield, every decision that you make must be quick and instant. And Andor kind of shows that in a lot of ways, both in and outside of action. Cassian chooses not to fully mourn Brasso because he knows that more Imperials will catch him and his friends if he does. When escaping with Mon Mafma, he does a QTE to catch the chauffeur off guard and kill him. Erskine gaslighting the ISB agent as a real spy, big brain move by the way, happens so quickly. Every decision they make must be swift because death or worse will be on the way. The fact that Cassian chose to shed a single tear during the massacre wasn't because he was being disrespectful. In fact, he used whatever time he had, which was probably a few seconds, to mourn. The only reason why he could spare one tear was because he had a mission. By contrast, we can see the Gorman who was absolutely bawling his eyes out after Cinta's death. Yes, he was new to the idea of rebellion, but his poor decision making in bringing a blaster is what ended the operation early and low-key could be considered a failure. Though he feels remorse for his actions, he is berated because of his incompetence. Incompetence and a lack of good decision making is what gets people killed in rebellion. It may not be you, but you will be responsible for others. Speaking of gritty reality, Sirill was such an interesting character, eh? And he's someone who's quite relatable to the average working class man. Sirill is introduced as an ambitious man who wants to make a name for himself like any other person would. When he meets Dedra, he gets a bunch of promotions and ends up as what I think would be like the head manager in the ISB Gorman branch. Sirill is an ambitious man thinking that he is making a great change in the Empire, but this fragile illusion shatters when he finally sees who he thought to be his nemesis, Cassian.
Who are you?
When Sirill finally hears this, he realizes he was just another cog in the corporate machine, a nobody. He also contrasts the average Imperial worker in the sense that he slowly realizes the deception the Empire was using to blind the masses of the Imperial workforce. Through his interactions with the Gormans, he realizes that the Empire has crafted the perfect genocide. The Empire has sneakily taunted the Gormans into violent revolution, and he was just another disposable pawn in its wake. His efforts were meaningless. He thought he was saving the Gormans but led their destruction. He thought he made an impact to the Empire but was just another pawn waiting to be sacrificed. He thought he meant something to others but was forgotten and belittled by the people who thought would care about him. Sirill tells the story of the tragic citizen brainwashed by a tyrannical system and found out all too late. Now the Gorman Massacre as a whole, I can't even describe into words the despair and brutality that I witnessed. We could all tell that this revolution was hopeless, and Cassian even warned the Gormans that it wouldn't work. But the dread building up from their first failed operation to knowing that the Imperials have intentionally leaked information, you can only wait to see how badly this will end. Brutal violence with blasters was just the beginning. What really made the situation truly hopeless was the release of the KX droids. Now, I knew that the KX droids were pretty dangerous. I've played Jedi Fallen Order. But I never realized how brutal they were. They were throwing people at walls, shattering their whole skeletons, kicking steel barriers at people with the force of a truck. Hell, one of them fucking baned someone in the background. Regular blaster fire couldn't even penetrate these droids, and the Gormans don't have more firepower than that. They're closed off with no place to hide, and the few that do escape are hunted down like dogs. You can hear actual terrified screams and begs of mercy to these unfeeling engines of death before they're silenced. And it's truly awful to watch, and exponentially worse if you were one of the characters to experience it. What made it more disgusting was how the Empire had planned this all out over a fancy lunch with media teams advertising that the Gormans were nothing more than violent savages. Now, let's not forget the main star of the show here, Cassian Andor. I mean, he's already been developed quite a bit in Season 1, how much more can we, develop him further? I know, let's make him lose everything. Throughout his entire journey, Andor has lost more than just friends. He has lost his innocence, his will, and eventually his life. In Rogue One, that is. What more can this man lose? Episode 3, he loses Brasso. Episode 9, he loses Bix. Well, not cause she dies, but she's pregnant. Spoilers. Episode 12, he doesn't realize he's got a child and will never meet him cause he's gonna fucking die. He is a witness to the Gorman Massacre where I assume hundreds of thousands of people died. There was only one instance, in my opinion, where Cassian truly gained something in this season. K2SO and, Melchi's return, so I guess that's two things. In episode 11, we see Cassian genuinely laugh for the first time in this season, and it's just him hanging with the boys. This happiness is short-lived, cause then he has to go rescue Clea, and then finds out that Luthen Alta Ford, and now is in the most dangerous he's ever been, since he now knows of the Death Star. My man can't catch a break! He's dealt with incompetency with the rebels in episode 2 as well as the Gormans. He tries his best to make sure people will survive, but it all ends in death. Especially after the Gorman Massacre, Cassian's definitely had enough. It truly broke him to know that so many people died in that one night, and he was ready to give it all up. but Bix is the one who pushes him to fulfill his duty within the rebellion. And now that we have the context from Andor Season 2, Rogue One is no longer about a team willing to risk everything for the greater good. Specifically for Andor, it is about a man who no longer has anything to lose and is willing to do whatever it takes to finish the mission. Cassian has grown from someone who worked for his own selfish needs to someone who is now willing to risk everything that he has to proceed with the mission and to make sure that the Empire loosens its grip on the galaxy. Now, I know that this was a long video, and it's mainly because I genuinely think that Andor is the best Star Wars series ever made. Like, I put it higher than Clone Wars, and I'm an absolute, gooner for Clone Wars. The drama, the dialogue, the character development, all of it is just so excellently woven together, and it doesn't feel like anyone's being overshadowed, honestly, in my opinion at least. And yes, I know I couldn't go through almost everything in the fucking series, and mainly that's because I think I would write enough for like an hour-long video essay, essentially. Hell, I could submit this as a thesis, I guess. But yeah, I think the show really fleshed out the beginnings of the rebellion, and the thing is that a lot of people were actually very curious about what the rebellion was like in the beginning and like how it was all started. And the people who are complaining about the dialogue, fuck them. You don't, just because Obi-Wan Kenobi is not in there doesn't mean that it's a fucking bad show. Just because there's no, less action, I guess, doesn't mean that there's, is not a good show. Come on. More importantly, it showed a more realistic description of the rebellion. It's no longer about the A-Team with Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, and it's more about the average rebel. The average rebel goes through so many brutal things. If you literally, it's not just the average rebel too. The average stormtrooper too. If you look at what Cassian did in episode 1, he tested an experimental weapon not knowing what it could do to a person on a stormtrooper. It's all so brutal. It's so gritty. It's real. Yes, sure, Cassian isn't your average rebel, but there are glimpses of the rebellion everywhere where the average rebel will die in an operation. Hell, at the end of his story, Cassian doesn't survive either. He blows up. It isn't like Rebels where everyone on the Ghost Crew somehow make it out. Well, except Kanan. It isn't like the Clone Wars where we know that most of the main cast will make it out alive. These are inexperienced rebels. Average citizens who either thought that the Empire was this tyrannical system or were brainwashed by its propaganda. Overall, I think Andor has probably made a lot of non-Star Wars fans curious enough to go into the entirety of the original trilogy and perhaps even further into Star Wars lore and other series. Hell, my friend is pretty interested in watching Clone Wars now, and he's been holding off on that for years. But yeah, with this in mind, Andor definitely deserves an Emmy this time around. And I know it got nominated, but this time it actually deserves it. So much great monologuing, Mon Mafma's speech definitely deserves an award somewhere in the Emmys. Come on, please, just give it to us. And my rating for the show, now, not to toot my own horn, I have really high standards for shows. This is the third or fourth series that gets more than a 10 out of 10 from me. This gets 100 out of 10 from me. And especially since I'm a huge Star Wars fan, it just bumps the rating even higher for me overall. But yeah, if you guys have any comments about the show, please let me know in the comments below and geek out with me about this whole shit. You can disagree, you can agree with me, it doesn't matter. This show is just so hype for me that I don't know, I want to discuss it with so many more people out there. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this show too. But with that, thank you so much for watching if you guys have sat through this entire video. It did take me a while to record this because I was trying to gather all my thoughts, but yeah, I couldn't add all the details I wanted to. But yeah, if you guys really like the show like I did, let's talk. But in the meantime, that's it for today's video. I'll see you guys next week or next week. Sorry, my video schedules are kind of fucked right now, but bye-bye.